Today's lesson 6.3 is on indirect proofs. Now, normally we do direct proofs, and direct proofs are two-column proofs that use definitions and theorems and postulates and corollaries, and everything that you have is a logical step to the next one. In indirect proofs, we still use logical reasoning, only it's an indirect way of showing something could possibly be true. An example of this would be to show if Sue was walking home and enters the house with a dry umbrella, how could you prove that it's not raining? Well, to do that, you would have to think of what would happen when it actually was raining, and the first step would be to assume that it is raining. If it were raining and Sue had an umbrella, what would that umbrella look like? If the umbrella would be wet if it were raining outside. Because her umbrella is dry, we could assume that it's not raining outside and then make that conclusion. To write an indirect proof, we're going to assume temporarily that the conclusion is not true. In the previous example, the conclusion that we were trying to make was that it was not raining outside, and the first step that we did was to assume for a second that it was raining. Once we assumed that it was raining out, we then logically concluded or reached a contradiction of the fact that if it were raining outside, she would have a wet umbrella. Since her umbrella was dry, we logically contradicted that fact. And therefore, once again, we pointed out, because it was a dry umbrella, that the conclusion must have been true to begin with. So the first sentence of an indirect proof is the most important. Hit pause and try to figure out the first sentence of these three indirect proofs. If AB equals 12 and AC equals 8, the first sentence would be, assume AC does not equal 8. Number 2, if angle Y is not congruent to angle B, then XZ is not congruent to AC. The first sentence in the indirect proof would be, assume that segment XZ is congruent to segment AC. And finally, if A is greater than B and X is greater than Y, then A plus X is greater than B plus Y. The first sentence would read, assume A plus X is less than or equal to B plus Y. The key there is putting the or equal to piece, because that's another way that you could also show that it is not greater than. Hit pause right now and do numbers 1 through 5. We're going to do an indirect proof completely here. The paragraph form is sort of optional in this case, but it's not going to be a two-column proof. The paragraph proof can be bulleted, but keep in mind it's not a key step proof, so we're going to have to show all those reasons no matter what and try to get to the conclusion with every step. If the given is the measure of angle X is not equal to the measure of angle Y, prove that angle X and angle Y are not both right angles. So first we're going to assume that angle X and angle Y are right angles. From there we're going to say that if they are right angles, then they equal 90 degrees. If they equal 90 degrees, then they are congruent. This contradicts the given information that the measure of angle X equals the measure of angle Y. The assumption that we used in the beginning, suppose angle X and angle Y are right angles, that is false, and therefore a conclusion can be made that they definitely are not right angles. Hit pause and answer questions 6 and 7, ordering the proofs that are already given to you. Our final indirect proof today is a given information that a parallelogram exists and the measure of angle X is 80 degrees, and our job is to prove that parallelogram XYZW is not a rectangle. Hit pause and see if you can find the few steps it takes to prove that this parallelogram is not a rectangle. The first step is obviously to say, assuming that it is a rectangle, we could then conclude that it has 4 right angles. Properties of a rectangle would indicate that. From there, it contradicts the given that angle X, which is a vertex of the parallelogram, is 80 degrees. And therefore, since it contradicts the assumption is, since it contradicts the given, the assumption is true and the parallelogram is a rectangle, is false. Answer questions 8 and 9 tonight for homework, and bring them back in with any questions you may have.